So the principles in this book have really guided me and challenged me in every area of my life. They're especially been influential in my business life and in the way I approach things as a business leader. And that's why I wanted to share the principles that I've learned from this book that I've been applying for several years now. So the book here is called The One Thing by Gary Keller of Keller Williams and Jay Papasan. And it's a book all about the power of focus and the power of the domino effect. And I'm actually going to reference my copy here a couple times throughout this because it's just been such a huge change for me, helping me understand and stay focused and be critically thinking about the effects of how I'm spending my time. So that's what the book is about, is the power of focus and the power of the domino effect. And I want to share the domino effect with you briefly. The key to the one thing is that you want to be choosing your actions that will be conscientiously choosing actions that will have the biggest effect in the long run. Be thinking about what the next domino is and leverage your choices and leverage your energy. So the book starts out with a little bit of an introduction as to that, and we all kind of understand that because that's why we're here. And then it talks about the 6 lies, and I'm not going to cover all of them. For that, you would want to read the book. This book has been such an influence on my life that there's 3 or 4 books I give away, and this is one of them. If you would like a copy of this book, just to put on your bookshelf, I would encourage you to read it. But I give this book away all the time because it really, especially for a business owner, but really for anyone, unlike Profit First, which I've talked about in another video, which is really for a business owner, this book can be applied by anyone to their job or career. And I'd be happy to send you a copy for free. It's made that much of an impact on my life that I want to give it away to other people because I figure if I give away a few, it's going to help some of them. And that just gets me excited. So if you'd like a copy of this book, hit the form and send me your mailing address and we'll send you a copy of the book so that you can follow along with that. I actually consume this one as an audiobook, and you can get that on audible.com. If you ask, I can send you a free copy on audible.com instead. Being able to listen while you drive to work or while you drive to a project or while you're doing your exercises, whatever you're doing, audible.com is great for that. And this is a book I consume that way, but I have several paper copies available as well. So please let me know. I'll ship one right to your doorstep. So I was talking about the 6 lies, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but a couple that really stood out to me. Number 1 was that everything matters equally. And Gary Keller and Jay Papasan talk about this in reflection to the 80-20 rule, as we know it, or Pareto's principle, which is that it's a law of nature that 20% of the wealthiest people own 80% of the land. And they give various other examples of how that's generally true. And the percentages might change a little bit, but generally 20% of your effort is yielding 80% of your results. 20% of your customers are yielding the largest portion of your profit. And 20% of your ideas will yield the largest growth or expansion or whatever it might be. And so you want to be focusing on identifying that 20%. And what I really loved about this is the way they applied it to your to-do list. Because if you are like me, your to-do list is a mile long, and those are just the things I wrote down. I actually have different kinds of to-do lists. I have to-do lists for leads. I have to-do lists for operations. I have to-do lists for marketing. And the principle here is that a to-do list doesn't necessarily give you results. It's usually driven by the first thing to come to mind was the first thing on the list. It's not targeting at a goal. And you need to take your to-do list and turn it into a success list by applying the 80% rule, the 80-20 rule. So if I can only do half of these things, or in the case of the 80-20 rule, 1 out of these 5 things or 2 out of these 10 things, what are the ones that are going to yield me the best results and take me the furthest? What are going to have the biggest impact? Okay, I've narrowed my list down to 4. Now, which one of these is the most important? And we get to the one thing. Take the 80-20 rule and go to the extreme. And then they talk about, in the book, they talk about the opposite effect that happens, which is in order to say yes to that one thing, something else has to say no. And you have to get better at saying no. And they give a lot of suggestions and tools for that. But that ultimately, that's what's going to yield more success for you is saying yes to the right things and saying no to the other things. And so that has been a huge lesson for me, is taking my to-do list, turning it into a success list, and working harder and harder at saying no. Another one of the lies is multitasking. We've kind of been taught in today's society that a computer can multitask and we should be able to also. And that's just not true. It took a little bit of convincing for me to believe this one. We can juggle, we can walk and talk and chew gum. And they explain why some of that works and it's not really multitasking. But to really focus on something and to give it the attention it deserves, if you think you're multitasking, what you're actually doing is task switching. And you're losing time and you're losing energy and focus by switching and reloading the rules. I'm switching to this task, and so now I have to go back. And sometimes it's just a little bit here and there, but it really adds up. And sometimes it's a lot. I mean, you can lose an entire day's worth of progress because you have to reorient yourself on a bigger project. There's some interesting statistics in the book about how much time is lost in the office, in the average American office, just by task switching. And I want to say it's like 30%. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to think about. So multitasking is a lie. Stay focused on one thing. Discipline, living a life of discipline is another lesson that I took from their 6 lies, and how that's not true. When we see disciplined people, what we're really seeing are people who have built a series of habits over time. It does take time to build those habits, but as you build one and then elevate and build the next over time, those habits then drive your success, and you appear disciplined when in reality you just need enough discipline to build the habit, and then automaticity takes over and it becomes automatic for you, and you just need a little bit here and there to stay focused and not lose the habit, but it's much easier to maintain once it's built. The second thing they talk about in there is that a lot of self-help circles will say it takes 21 days, but it usually takes a lot longer than that. The average is 66 days, depending on how strong the habit and how challenging it is. So expect to spend 2 to 3 months building a really good habit, which is back to focusing on which habits you're building. So that was huge for me. Number 4 also stuck out to me, and that was willpower. We think I can't do a good job because I don't have enough character, or I'm not determined enough, or I can't seem to, in the evening, I can't just seem to go back to work. And some people may not have this problem. They may have it more on the focusing end, but that really spoke to me. It's not necessarily a matter of being disciplined. It's a matter of building the habits. And one of the challenges there is that willpower is not always on will call. And we can't always just will ourselves to do something. The energy it takes to will yourself to do something depletes. Depletes based on your fitness, it depletes based on what you have eaten today. And they talk about that. And it depletes based on how tired you are. And so they talk about the importance of doing your one thing as early in the day as possible. That's been really big for me. Making that the priority, because that's the thing that's going to drive everything else forward. We'll come back to that in just a second. And then they talk a lot about balance. That was another lesson I took. That the magic happens at the extremes, and that one of the lies is thinking we need to live a balanced life. I love the example they give that finally made this come across to me, which is that a ballerina who is posing lifeless in the air, I don't know how they say it, en pointe, that she appears to be floating. But what's actually happening is if you look down at her foot, it's vibrating back and forth very quickly, maintaining the illusion of balance, that you're never fully in balance. You're always pushing back and forth and counterbalancing. And that the question is, how far should you wobble, for lack of a better word? How far should you go before you counterbalance back? And their basic principle is that the magic happens at the extremes. Go extreme at work, go extreme in your business, go extreme in your career, go as far as you can without losing everything, but understand that some things are going to have to wait. And some things are so far down the list that they're not going to get done, and that's okay because you're doing more important, more impactful things. At home, when you deal with fitness and family and mental health and finances, you need to counterbalance much more quickly. If you go to the extreme with your health, you'll have major health issues and you may never recover. But work will always bounce back. So go as far to the extreme as you can, but do counterbalance. And so the second thing they talk about is separate, or the second lesson I took from that idea of counterbalancing instead of balancing is separate things into two buckets. This is my work bucket, and this is my personal bucket. And then look at each bucket completely separately. So when I look at my work bucket, and this lesson took me a while, which is why I'm going into detail. It's about the 7th time through that I finally got it. But when I look at my work bucket, my business bucket, I want to go as far to one extreme as I can and then swing back and cover everything that's still left, and then go as far to the extreme for as long as I can and then swing back. When I look at my personal bucket, it's a completely different view. And when I look at my personal bucket, when I look at my relationship with my wife or with my son, when I look at my health, when I look at finances, I want to keep going back and forth, spending time with my wife on a regular basis, making sure that I don't go too far to one extreme. Does that make sense? So you're in work, you want to counterbalance slowly and go as far to the extremes as you can. In your personal life, you need to keep your health and your personal relationships all in balance and in balance against each other. You want to find ways to combine activities as well. But that's a great lesson that I took. And then there's a 6th law, it was the big is bad. And there were some great lessons in there, but for sake of time, I'm going to let you read that one. So the next thing they talked about was the 4 truths. And they start with one truth that I actually want to read a poem from the book. So this poem is called My Wage by J.B. Rittenhouse, and it really just resonated with me. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer. He gives you what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn, dismayed, that any age I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. That sits heavy on me every time I read it, because the lesson here is that what we ask for is what we get. And the questions that we ask of ourselves and the questions that we ask of our life are what will ultimately determine our outcome. And the principle they take is that the way we phrase those questions will then determine the answers that we seek and apply, which will then determine our eventual results. And that's a big lesson here. And it leads to, how do you come up with uncommon questions that take you to uncommon answers? And their answer is the focusing question. And so the one thing is centered around this focusing question, because it guides you to an uncommon approach to living your life. And the question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And this question I ask, like the book kind of guides you to, I ask this question of everything important in my life. Certainly on the personal side, but very frequently on the business side. I have it actually on the wall over here as a little reminder for myself. That's not a very good angle, but what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? That's how strongly that question impacts me and influences me. So when it comes to growing my business and growing myself as a business owner, I ask that question all the time. They also talk about the success habit, which is essentially applying that being your first habit, the first habit that you should start developing, unless you have one that you know will have a more direct impact on you, which might be your physical health or your financial state. And for that, I'll reference you to Profit First. But is asking yourself this question about everything that matters in life. And so that's the habit that I've been developing really over the last 2 years since I read the book. And that finding the answers to this question, that this question is the path to great answers. They go into some additional things like purpose leading to priority and leading to productivity. If you want to achieve extraordinary results, know your purpose. Your purpose drives your priority, which you discover these by asking yourself the one thing. And then that leads to productivity. So I'm going to include a little bit of extra information here at the end. But if you're about to stop the video, this book, The One Thing, this is I highly recommend this. I'd be happy to send you a free copy. It's by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. It's available on Amazon and on Audible if you like audiobooks. Just real quick, I love this cover. that they did, this is a domino. And the one thing is all about lining up your first domino and knocking it over so that it makes it easier to knock over the next domino, and how that multiplies. Every domino a little bigger, a little more impactful than the last. And asking yourself the focusing question helps you figure out which domino to start working on this month, today. So that's why I love the one thing, and that's why I highly recommend anyone who wants to succeed in their life or make changes in their career that you check this book out and see if it resonates with you like it resonates with me. Before I let you go, just a few quick other thoughts that I wanted to share with you, and that is how to kind of work and how I use it. So when I'm dealing, what I try to do is follow their principles to identifying what I should be working on. And so I ask myself in life, what is my overall goal? What is my someday goal? What's the one thing I want to do before I'm gone? What kind of impact do I want to leave, and legacy do I want to leave behind me? And that's a very challenging question that I consider, several times a year. And with what I have as my current goal in mind, I then set a 5-year goal. And I do that by asking the focusing question. And it just modify it slightly. And they walk you through this in the book, but I think it helps to understand that. So what's the one thing I could do in the next 5 years to reach that would take me towards my someday goal, such that by doing it, everything else would become easier and unnecessary? And for me, that's building my business. I have a specific goal for that. Then I do that with my 1 year. Okay, in order to achieve my 5-year goal, what's the one thing I can do this year such that by doing it, everything else in achieving that 5-year goal will become easier or unnecessary? And I think about this. I actually use their planner to help refresh this, and I reassess that. And then we go down to a month, and then and I ask the whole thing, and then we go back to a week. And so every week I sit down and I say, so in order to achieve my someday goal, and in order to achieve my 5-year goal, and my 1 year goal, and my 1 month goal, what's the one thing I can do this week such that by doing it, achieving all of those goals will become easier or unnecessary? And as they teach, this helps you line your dominoes up. So you know that you're working on something that's going to follow that 80-20 principle and is going to knock over a domino that will make it easier to knock over the next domino. Another big lesson I take from them is everything does not matter equally, and how that applies to our time. We only have so much time in a day. And if you want to knock over that domino and get to the next level, you're going to have to do that early, and you're going to have to do that first. And you're going to have to say no to other things. But that's really the only way to achieve success, is learning what to say no to. And sometimes it means saying no to things I want to do. But in order to get where I want to go, I have to do that. A lot of times it means saying no to myself. And I don't mean that in the sense of denial, although when it comes to health and fitness, that's definitely an area that I fight in. But I mean, sometimes I want to take a good idea and execute it myself. And what I need to do is let go of the details. The details are not what's driving that domino to fall over. Me doing it myself is not what's driving that domino to fall over. So part of my personal growth, especially as a business owner, that I'm struggling with right now, just to be real, is letting go of things that I want to do myself. But the fact of the matter is, it'll probably get done faster and better by somebody else if I would just trust. And so learning to communicate better and learning to hand things over, that's a domino that I'm working on. That's a habit that I'm working on right now. And every week I have a reset. Okay, what's my goal for this week to keep me on track for my 1 month goal, to keep me on track for my 1 year goal, to keep me on track for my 5-year goal, to keep me on track for my someday goal? What's one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? So I hope that helps. I hope you took a little bit from this that you can apply to your life. Ask yourself that focusing question every week, every month, every day, at the beginning of every day. And let me know if you want a free copy of the book. I will be more than happy to send it to you. Thanks.